I don't know why I need my glasses. All right. Good evening, everybody. So I was sort of ambivalent about whether to start with a joke, because after all, the subject is anti-Semitism, and what can you possibly say that's funny about anti-Semitism? But I'm going to give it a try. And if you don't like it, then I guess I'll learn for next time not to start with a joke. But this joke actually originated in Germany in the 1930s. In Nazi Germany. And it's a very dark joke. It's told that a rabbi in Germany in the 30s was a big fan of reading Der Stürmer. Der Stürmer was a Nazi newspaper full of vile, terrible things said about the Jews nonstop. And he loved reading this newspaper. And one day, one of his congregants saw him reading the paper and said, "Rabbi, what are you doing? Are you out of your mind? I mean, this is awful. Are you one of those like self-hating Jews? What's the matter with you?" And the rabbi said, "Actually, on the contrary." He says, "Whenever I read the Jewish newspapers, I always get depressed because I just read about pogroms and riots in Palestine and assimilation in America. And I get really depressed. But when I read Der Stürmer, I see that all of a sudden the Jews control the world, the Jews control the banks, the Jews control the commodities market, the Jews control the stock market. I feel much better about things. It just makes me feel a whole lot better." All right, so as I said, I don't know if it was a good idea to start with a joke or not, but that's the joke. That being said, I'd like to officially welcome everybody. And I'd like to begin with reading a chapter from the book of Psalms for our brothers and sisters in Israel and anybody who's in harm's way anywhere. Rabbi Markovits, would you like to read the 121st Psalm? If you don't have it handy, I can do it.
Please put it up. Can you hear me?
I don't have it up. If you don't have a Sefer Tehillim with you, then I'll just read
I've got it right in front of me.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to this two-part series about anti-Semitism, and it's really special for me to be a part of this and to be listening to Rabbi Hambourger providing this class, and I think everyone here is going to find some insight in it. I would like to take a moment to see chapter 121, and I'm going to draw your attention to one of the verses here that says, "From where does my help come? My help comes from God." And so let's read this together. We'll read it in Hebrew. So we'll read it in English first, and then we'll read it in Hebrew. And here we go. A song for ascents. I shall raise my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help is from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to falter. Your guardian will not slumber. Behold, the guardian of Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your guardian. The Lord is your shadow. He is by your right hand. By day the sun will not smite you, nor will the moon at night. The Lord will guard you from all evil. He will guard your soul. The Lord will guard your going out, your coming in, from now and to eternity. Now I'll read it in Hebrew. Join me on chapter 121. Shir lama lois esrainai el hahorim me'ayin yavoi Ezri. Ezri me'im adinoi oisei shamayim va'oretz. Al yitain lamoit raglecha al yonum shemrecha. Hinei lo yanum v'lo yishon shoymei Yisrael. Adinoi shemrecha, adinoi tzilcha al yad yiminecha. Yoimam hashemesh lo yakeka v'yarech b'layla. Adinoi yishmarcha mikol ra yishmar es nafshecha. Adinoi yishmar tzeischa uvayecha me'ata v'yad oilom. Good luck, guys. Enjoy the class, and I will see you with God's help again later on.
Thank you, Rabbi Markovits. I don't know if anyone doesn't know Rabbi Markovits. Chaim Markovits is the founder and the director of Chabad of rural Georgia, and his territory is 60,000 square miles of Georgia. And this is a very busy time of year for him. I think that the rabbi has 6 different public menorah lightings over Hanukkah, so he's very busy with logistics right now. But with that said, let's get into the subject. Obviously, whatever we've experienced in anti-Semitism by way of anti-Semitism pales by comparison of what Jews of previous generations have experienced. But nonetheless, it's rearing its ugly head. And while whatever fears we have about anti-Semitism today, again, pale by comparison, let's be happy we're not living in Hyde Park, London. Let's be happy we're not in Paris, and where things are much worse. If you think about Israel, Israel's completely surrounded with 150,000 rockets to its north and God knows what to its east. It's very, very scary stuff. So by comparison, you could say that we have it very easy. But on the other hand, I just want to share with you, somebody shared with me yesterday, they were at Whole Foods in Buckhead, Georgia. For those of you who aren't in Georgia, welcome to everybody from Nevada, from Arizona, from Florida. So anyway, she went to Whole Foods Market yesterday, and she saw somebody with a T-shirt, black, red, and green, and it said, "Free Palestine from the river to the sea." And she wasn't prepared for that. You can't call that a matter of overt anti-Semitism, and yet at the same time, she said all the blood left her body when she saw that. She didn't know how to react. So I bring this to your attention to say that it is normal to have fear. It is normal to be scared, because none of us, I think maybe I'm the oldest one on here, but nonetheless, we're all relatively young, and I don't think any of us have much memory of anti-Semitism. Maybe an occasional being called a kike, or maybe an occasional story about no Jews, no dogs allowed, those kind of things. But for the most part, this is all brand new for us. And I just want to say that the fear is appropriate, because don't forget, we are all links in a chain that goes back 3,400 years, and we have had more than our share of anti-Semitism. So that's what I want to say about that. I want to also sort of issue a spoiler alert, and that is that when we finish this evening, you may say, I didn't hear anything new. I didn't hear anything I don't know. If I talk about, tonight's subject is why do they hate us? Next week's subject is some pragmatic, practical things that we can do. But you may not be satisfied with the answers. They may be things you've heard before. They may not be things you've heard before. But just letting you know ahead of time that between all the academics and all the geniuses and all the Elie Wiesels and all the rabbis and all the statesmen and all the brilliant academics, you've heard most of it all already, and none of it really leaves us feeling terribly satisfied. Tonight, we're going to approach things actually from a spiritual perspective, from a Kabbalistic perspective, which is the inner Jewish mystical aspect of things, which are really quite deep, and that's what we're going to get into. First, I just want to introduce you and give some context to the subject. The first incidence of anti-Semitism actually is recorded in the Torah in the book of Exodus, and it took place 3,406 years ago, when Pharaoh says to his court, "Behold, the people of the children of Israel are becoming more numerous and stronger than we. Let us deal shrewdly with them." That was 3,400 years ago. Not to be outdone, I'm just going to give you the highlights, because otherwise we could spend 3 hours just listing off everybody who's hated us historically. Next comes Amalek. After Amalek comes Agag, Haman, Constantine. Let's not forget the Crusaders, and of course the Inquisition, the Protestant Reformation, Khmelnytsky, Nazi Germany, Stalin's Russia, and our Arab neighbors. So we're no strangers to this, but again, our generation is. It's kind of ironic that today you have, on the one hand, you have the American Nazi Party, and on the extreme other hand, you have Queers for Palestine, and yet they share something in common. That one thing that they share in common is a hatred of Israel. In fact, you can say that about the far left and the far right in general. There's really nothing that unites them except for the fact that they hate us, which is extraordinary. So they've hated us from time immemorial. And this hatred, for those of, if we talk about the roots of anti-Semitism, some people will say it's because they think that we killed their Lord. Well, let's not forget that anti-Semitism began about 1400 years prior to Christianity, and about 2000 years before the advent of Islam. So you can't say that it's a religious thing. You can't say it's a nationalistic thing. You can't explain it any which way. By the way, I want to encourage anybody to interject. I see you're all on mute. If anybody has comments, please make them. If anybody wants to interact, please do so. Please keep it on target and keep it brief, but it's important that this becomes a discussion, not just me talking, it's you guys. So we can come up with lots of reasons. You know, on the one hand, you could say that they told us they wish we all died in the gas chambers. And on the other hand, they denied that the Holocaust ever happened. On the one hand, they tell us get out of our country. On the other hand, they tell us get out of Israel. So any way you look at it, it's virtually impossible to win because the reasons are completely contradictory. So tonight we're going to try to make sense of that, as I mentioned, using the Kabbalah. So just as we jump into this, I want to give credit to Rabbi Ari.
Yeah.
Sorry, Meg? I want to give credit to Rabbi Ari Solish, who developed this curriculum. And he's an extraordinary teacher of Torah. He has a website called TorahCenterATL.com. And I recommend that you visit it. He's a brilliant, brilliant guy, and he's an excellent teacher. So as I mentioned, please feel free to jump into this conversation. So let's begin by just jumping back 100 years. We're going to focus on America for the moment. It was the turn of the 20th century. Things were going pretty well for the Jews, and then World War I hit. And with World War I, in the wake of World War I, came a surge of anti-Semitism. And it became part of the American way of life. And believe it or not, not even America's pastime was exempt. What was America's pastime? I'm not a big fan of these kinds of things, but America's pastime, even I know, is baseball. So with that said, who would feel comfortable reading the first text? Who wants to be the first to go? I nominate, is that Alan?
I'll do it.
All right, Philip, go ahead.
Okay. Sunday, September 29th, 1935, was also Rosh Hashanah. With the pennant secured, Detroit Tigers first baseman Hank Greenberg could have sat without hurting his team, but the home run title was on the line. He had 36 homers to Jimmy Fox's Philadelphia Athletics first baseman, 34. Hank played. Hank swung hard without result. He struck out 3 times and went 0 for 7 on the day. Meanwhile, in a game against the Washington Senators, Jimmy Fox hit 2 home runs in Shibe Park to tie Hank for the 36th on the season. The Senator catcher hadn't wanted a Jew to win the batting title, so he had Fox know what pitches were coming. Afterwards, the catcher bragged that he had kept Greenberg from winning the home run title. When Henry Coppola, the Senators' pitcher, who took the loss, found out that the catcher had betrayed him, he punched him in the nose, but the damage was already done. Greenberg had to share the home run title.
Thank you very much, Phil. Appreciate it. So think about this. Here's a catcher, a professional baseball player who totally throws his team, throws the pitcher, throws his team, throws his fans under the bus just to stop this Jew, Hank Greenberg, from winning the home run title. And don't forget, Hank Greenberg was not like a Sandy Koufax. He wasn't doing that shtick. He was playing on Rosh Hashanah. So does this make any sense? He's not even a religious guy, and yet he's completely hated in professional baseball. Anybody want to weigh in on this one? Anybody have something to say? Please jump in, anybody. Okay, you think that's bad? Let's keep going. You might not know this, but there was actually a time when Jews were ordered to be expelled in America, which is pretty shocking. Happened in the early days of the Civil War. The North thought that it was going to be easy to beat the South, and then came the battle, or the first battle of Bull Run, and the South beat the North, and the North realized we have to really hunker down, and we have to fight a multi-pronged war, which includes an economic war. So the plan was to strangle the South financially. So the North enacted an economic embargo on the South, banning the Union from purchasing, from importing, from transporting, from exporting any goods from the South. And what was the number one good from the South? Of course, that is cotton. So how do you do that? How do you do that when everybody needs cotton, when the Union needs cotton? So the cotton allowed a little bit of trade of cotton for its own essential means, but it completely made illegal any kind of dealing on a large scale with any commodity, including cotton. So what happened, of course, is that people started smuggling. They could buy from the South for pennies. They could sell to the North for lots of money. And corruption was everywhere. Soldiers were corrupt. Even the people that were enforcing this edict were corrupt. Everybody was making money selling cotton. At the time, General Grant was, I don't know what his rank was. He was a general, certainly. And he was in charge of, I think, Mississippi and Tennessee and Kentucky. His father, by the way, I just happened parenthetically to have read a biography on Grant, pretty fascinating. Anyway, his father was a real interesting guy. And he was in business with 3 Jews from Cincinnati, the Mack brothers. So he made a deal with his business partner saying that he would get a certificate, a pass, so he could buy cotton, and so he could trade, so the brothers could trade cotton, and he would have his father, General Grant, sign the thing. So needless to say, it didn't work out so well. First of all, the son was pretty upset with his father. He would not issue the permit. And what ends up happening is that Grant says, you guys are expelled. Who wants to read text number 2 regarding General Grant? Who wants to be that person, that lucky person who's going to read text number 2? Don't make me nominate you. I nominate my sister, Ellen Cheriton from Phoenix, Arizona.
Thank you, my brother. General Ulysses S. Grant, determined to put down the South Rebellion and focused upon capturing Vicksburg, Mississippi, looked upon all smugglers as traitors. He gave aid and comfort to the enemy and prolonged the war. He favored a total embargo on trade with the South, complete with blockades and sieges. Given the enormous pressures he was under to defeat the Southern Rebellion, he understandably lashed out at those who sought to undermine his strategy. Harmon, Henry, and Simon Mack, as part of the ingenious scheme, had formed a secret partnership with the ever entrepreneurial and somewhat shady Jesse Grant in return for 25% of their profits. Jesse Grant agreed to accompany them to his son's Mississippi headquarters and help them secure the means to transport cotton to New York. The Macks surely did not know how troubled the relationship between Ulysses S. Grant and his father was. Ulysses, like many a child who sets off on his own path, craved his father's approval, but winced at many of the old man's shortcomings. In this case, according to journalist Sylvanus Cadwallader, an eyewitness, the younger Grant waxed indignant at his father's crass attempt to profit from his military status and raged at the Jewish traitors who entrapped his old father into such an unworthy undertaking. He refused to supply the permit, sent the Macks homeward on the first train for the North, and in high dudgeon immediately issued the order expelling Jews as a class from his territory.
Thank you. You get that? Jews as a class. So now all of a sudden, this whole terrible enterprise has a face, and it has a Jewish face. Was it only Jews that were smuggling? No, not even close. But now we have a Jewish face that we can ascribe to this terrible matter. Ed, do you mind reading text number 3? Can you take yourself off mute? No, can't read? Okay. Who would like to read text number 3? Please go ahead, Philip. Oh, excuse me, Mrs. Jacoby.
Actually, it's Helene, Mrs. Phillip, yes. Official records of the War of the Rebellion. General Orders number 11, Headquarters 13 AC, Department of Tennessee, Holly Springs, December 17th, 1862. The Jews, as a class violating every regulation of trade established by the Treasury Department and also department orders, are hereby expelled from the department within 24 hours from the receipt of this order. Post commanders will see to it that all of this class of people be furnished passes and required to leave, and anyone returning after such notification will be arrested and held in confinement until an opportunity occurs of sending them out as prisoners, unless furnished with permit from headquarters. No passes will be given these people to visit headquarters for the purpose of making personal application of trade permits. By order of Major General U.S. Grant, etc.
Thank you very much, Helene. You get that? Anybody want to comment on this? Does everybody know what happened? Is this new for anybody? It's pretty shocking, yeah?
It's not new. I mean, I knew that this had happened. I didn't realize it had to do with this trading scheme between U.S. Grant's father and some traders. That's news to me.
Yeah, pretty shocking. Pretty shocking.
Well, it isn't news how the Southerners felt about the traders coming to the South and taking advantage of them because the North had won the war. So it was a general concept to the people of the South. They had, it was as much the carpetbaggers, they called them. They came down with a little bit of shekel and bought things up pennies on the dollar. And these people were starving. And that's the only way they could get some gelt.
The war wasn't over in 62. It was still going on. The carpetbaggers were after the war.
They were, yeah, but there was a whole trade of them building these relationships. I talked to some old people out of business in Mississippi, and they told me about it. Now, is it accurate? I don't know. But you could see how they felt.
Yeah, for sure.
And they had no discourse, negative discourse with me as a Jew.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I think the takeaway here is that, by the way, what ultimately happens is the Jews appeal to the president. They finally get a meeting with the president, and Lincoln declares shortly afterwards, he said, to condemn a class is, to say the least, to wrong the good with the bad. This was basically collective punishment. And it's pretty shocking that this took place. This was not medieval times. This was only 150 years ago in this country. Anyone else want to weigh in on this one before we move on? So I think what's becoming clear for us here is that in the US, right here in the US, whether we're talking about individual Jews like Hank Greenberg, or we're talking about collective things like the Mack brothers, either way, the reasons for the hatred are all over the place. With Greenberg, it's because he's too successful. With Grant, it's because the Jews are subverting the system. But there's always a different reason. Either we're too successful or we're poor. Either we're communists or we're capitalists. Either we stick to ourselves or we assimilate. No matter what we do, the reasons keep changing, and that's the paradox. Bernard Lewis, I think, says it real well in text number 4. Who wants to read text number 4? Actually, I see a hand up. I don't know what that means. Did you want to say something, Mr. Osborne? You got to take yourself off the mute. You have to unmute yourself. Where did you go?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay. You want me to read it?
Yes, please.
Okay. It was a common view among the Enlightenment European philo-Semites that Jewish separateness was an anomaly and was the cause of all Jewish defects, the existence of which they readily admitted. The solution was to end that anomaly, for the Jews to emerge from their ghettos, become part of the general population in every way. In other words, to cease to be Jews in any meaningful sense. While those Jews who insisted on remaining in the ghetto aroused one kind of indignation, their brothers who accepted the invitation to come out soon found themselves confronted by another, far more serious and dangerous kind of resentment. By the mid-19th century, anti-Semitism was underpinned by a new theoretical and polemical literature, portraying the Jew as an evil and dangerous intruder in European society, whose penetration and depredation had to be stopped if that society was to survive. By now, the difference and the danger are defined, usually, though not exclusively, in racial rather than religious terms.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Ed. Well, I think we're sort of, not that we didn't know this already, but Jew hatred is a fact of life. It's an absolute in fact, in the Passover Haggadah, who wants to read text number 5 from the Passover Haggadah? It's a real short one. Who hasn't read? I would like to read text number 5 from the Passover Haggadah. Denise, please take yourself off mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. It is not only one individual, Pharaoh, that has risen up against us to destroy us. Rather, in every generation, they rise against us to annihilate us. But the Holy One, blessed be he saves us from their hand.
Thank you very much. So there you go. I mean, this has been going on from time immemorial. And like the old joke is, they come to oppress us, they come to annihilate us, and pass the matzo balls. I mean, that's kind of like the story of our lives. In fact, I have a theory that, like, to be a real good dictator means that you have a dessert named after you. So we have Hamantaschen from Purim. We've got the Napoleon from Napoleon. I mean, stop and think about it. I think they might correlate. Okay, never mind. I'm sorry. Listen, so let's
Making me hungry.
okay, thank you. At least I'm getting a reaction. Listen to this. From the year 250 of the Common Era until 1948, that was 1700 years, Jews in Europe experienced an average of 1 expulsion every 21 years. Jews were expelled from England, France, Austria, Germany, Lithuania, Spain, Portugal, Bohemia, Moravia, and 71 other countries. Today in Japan, there are less than 2,000 Jews, and anti-Semitism is all over the place. You know, when people want to convert to Judaism, one of the first things we ask them is, what's wrong with you? Are you Meshuggah? Like, who would want to do this? Like, the whole subject, it's a serious subject in terms of how do you define Jewishness, and that's not the purpose of this class. But when somebody asked Golda Meir, how do you define a Jew? She said, anybody crazy enough to want to be a Jew can be a Jew. And that's really, in many respects, the, the criteria. So it's been around from time immemorial. The reasons keep changing. And I think this Rabbi Menachem Zemba, who you may not have heard of, he was in Auschwitz. He ended up getting killed by the Nazis. But basically, he says that it's a law. Well, here, let somebody read number 6. Who wants to read number 6? Menachem Zemba. Who wants to step up? Larry, you feel like reading? No? Okay, so let's ask for, go ahead, Bill. It says Bill, but that's Ed. I'm not going to ask any questions. Go ahead, Ed.
The Midrash in Bereshit Rabbah states, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said, it is a well-known law that Esau hates Jacob. What does law have to do with this? There are those who think that they will discover the rationale and the causes of anti-Semitism, and they strive to do so. However, reality demonstrates that there is not even one valid reason. The hatred defies logic and reason. Their hearts have simply turned to hating God's people. In one place, they hate Jews because they are capitalists. In another, because they are socialists. Here, they hate them because they work harder and are smarter than the average individual. There, they hate them because they are a useless burden on society. Here, they are too pious and zealous. There, they are too progressive and secular. That's how it always is. The reasons are always contradictory. Therefore, Rabbi Shimon said, it is a well-known law that Esau hates Jacob. For Esau's hatred of Jacob is like a settling principle that can be stated without any supporting rationale.
And by the way, I think you have a career, if you're interested in doing those books on tape. You have a great reading. So let me give some context about Jacob and Esau. Jacob and Esau, as you know, are brothers. And Jacob is known as the progenitor of the Jewish people, and Esau is known as the progenitor of the European Gentile people. And here, basically what's being said is that anti-Semitism is baked into the system. It's baked into the cake from the very beginning. In fact, it's said that it's a law, a halacha, a law that Esau hates Jacob, period. So that's the way God set it up, which is pretty scary. The reasons are always going to change, but no matter what time, no matter what place, we can count on somebody hating the Jews. Wish it wasn't true, but unfortunately it is. So just to sum up what we've covered so far, number one, anti-Semitism has been around since time immemorial. Number two, Jewish texts tell us that anti-Semitism is a fact of life. Number three, the typical rationales for anti-Semitism don't hold water. They're bubamaises. They're always changing. It's like there's a parable about a guy that is an archer, and he shoots arrows and he gets a bullseye every time. And when somebody asks him, how do you do that? How do you get a bullseye every time you shoot? He says, it's very easy. First, I shoot the arrow and then I draw the bullseye around the arrow. So it's the same thing with anti-Semitism. You know, we really believed, and tell me if you share this opinion, we really believed after World War II, after the Holocaust, that Jew hatred was over. The Simon Wiesenthal came up, all the Holocaust museums started coming up all over the place. Never again became the slogan. Holocaust studies got incorporated into all the school systems. Survivors came and taught at all the public schools. Politicians knew if they want to get elected, that they would have to say something nice on Holocaust Memorial Day. To this day, anybody in office, whether it's the German Chancellor or the French Prime Minister or anyone else, they have to say nice things about the Jews. So we hear all that and we say, wow, finally, something happened here, something changed. And now, unfortunately, we're seeing that nothing changed. Or if we look at the ADL, and for example, ADL has done amazing things, but they really believed, and I think they miscalculated, that if they show solidarity and support for other marginalized and oppressed groups, that of course, when needed, we could call that in and get that kind of support. That didn't work out so well, in my opinion. I don't think it worked out well at all, which doesn't mean that we should not have championed the things that the ADL championed. I'm just saying that the reciprocity isn't there. Or another example, if you look at that dust up, I forgot when it was, maybe a year ago with Kanye West, where he accused the Jew, all the anti-Semitic tropes came out. Remember that the Jews control this and the Jews control that. So then what do we end up doing? We ended up proving that he was right. We got all of his contracts canceled, thinking that we were doing something smart, but all it did was reinforce his point that the Jews control everything. Just want to share. Mayor Lau, who was the chief rabbi of Israel, went to Italy to meet with the Pope. Before the meeting, he met with the chief rabbi of Italy in Rome. And in the meeting, chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Lau, asks the chief rabbi of Italy, how many Jews are there in Italy? And the rabbi doesn't answer him. So he asks him again. And he asks him in a different way. And he doesn't get an answer to the question, how many Jews are there in Italy? Finally, the rabbi answers him and says, Rabbi Lau, we don't really like talking about it because there's only 40,000 Jews in Italy, but they think there's millions of us. What do you mean? He says, Prime Minister Berlusconi, when he was running for the last re-election, asked me, so are the Jews going to vote for me? And I said, I'm sorry, Prime Minister, but we can't vote for you. And he was devastated. He said, why not? He said, because the election is on the Sabbath, it's on Shabbat. So that year they changed the election from Saturday to Friday. So this gives you an indication. Where's the second largest press pool outside of Washington, D.C. is in Israel. No Jews, no news. They think we're huge. We're 1/4 of the population of the country. Anyway, I'm digressing. What am I talking about? I'm talking about my big question. My big question is, if none of the typical stated reasons for anti-Semitism make any sense, if they don't hold any water in historical or in sociological scrutiny, what's the cause for the hate? Does anybody want to jump in and give the $1 million answer? What's the cause for the hate? Go ahead, Ed.
Well, I think like most discrimination, it's a question of ignorance of the person who's doing the hating. And with the Jews, I think that's certainly the case. And even today, I meet people who don't know what a Jew is or what being Jewish is. So I think ignorance is certainly a part of it.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone else?
I think that when I came back from Atlanta, I built a business in Mississippi. And I got to know a lot of people, and a handshake still mattered. And they knew I was a Jew. And as they got to know me, they asked me a question. They said, how could a Jew be a liberal? They had no concept of believing that a Jew who's gone through what he has and has worked as he has would want to condescend to the liberal attitude. And that was the absolute common statement made to me.
Jim, I just wanted to share with you a quick anecdote. What was the basketball players? Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan's uncle was running for Congress in Carolina. He asked Michael to endorse him, and Michael said no. And he said, why not? And he said, because Republicans buy tennis shoes also. So I bring this up because we're really trying to stay away from anything remotely has to do with politics, because that's the quickest way to divide a group. So I appreciate what you're saying, but I'd like to kind of step over that with all due respect. Anyone else want to join the subject? Okay, so let's move into the Kabbalah. The mystics, they don't dabble on the surface of things. They go right to the heart and the soul of the matter. So let's see from their perspective if we can make some sense out of anti-Semitism. Unless we can save all this, if you want to cut it short tonight, if somebody could just answer the question, why the hate? Okay, I didn't think so. Like I said, Ed? Tex, did you want to say something? Mr. Osborne, did you want to say something? Oh.
No, my questions before on the subject. How do people even say something like a class, like Grant saying a class of individuals. I don't understand that. It's not a class of individuals. It's just individuals. And it was two people who happen to be Jewish involved in that. I see this all, it's a theme all the way through. It's just looks like there's some way to blame someone. That looks like a group that it won't matter.
Mhm.
It's disturbed me all my life.
Thank you for that. All right,
Yonatan,
yes.
and maybe as you go into the Kabbalah part, you'll get to this, but you said at the end of text 6 that it's baked into the system, and you reference halakha law, but then said God set it up. Can you expand on that, or will you be going through that later?
Given the fact that the reasons that the whole subject of anti-Semitism is supernatural, it makes absolutely no sense. It's different than any other kind of hatred. It's not xenophobia. It's not. It's something else altogether. And I'm sorry to say it, at least from my perspective, it's something godly. Not really happy about it, but it can only be explained that way. It had to be baked in. There's no other way to explain it, because based on merit, they should love us.
Exactly.
We invented blue jeans. Like,
Yeah.
they should love us. What's the matter with them? All right, you didn't like that. Whatever. Okay, yeah, and the polio vaccine. Okay, fine. Let's talk about Purim. Let's talk about the holiday of Purim, because this is where the Kabbalists go to immediately. So here's a brief recap of Purim. I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but when I say Haman, you can all scream. We're talking about the time period between the destruction of the first temple and the rebuilding of the second temple. Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian, destroyed the first temple in the year 586 BC. Prior to that, the Assyrians wiped out the northern tribes. Nebuchadnezzar carried the Jews away with him to Babylonia. Shortly thereafter, the Babylonians are deposed by the Persians. The head of the Persians, Ahasuerus, marries either the daughter or the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar, and he's got a huge kingdom that stretches all the way from Africa to the Far East. It's the largest empire in the known world. We have a character, so we have Ahasuerus, who's the king. We have Queen Esther. I'm not going to get into that story right now, but we have his queen, who just so happens to be a Jew and the niece of the hero Mordecai. And then we have the evil advisor, because what story would not be complete? What story would, how can we do without the arch villains? The arch villain is a guy named Haman. Boo, boo, boo. So, towards the beginning of the book, and the book of Esther is a book in the Torah, and we read it every Purim, and every time we mention the name Haman, we boo, and then we eat his ears in a little cookie called a homontashen. Don't ask. All right. Who would like to read text number 7? At the beginning of the book of Esther, we read about Haman's request of the king. And this is going to be the basis that the Kabbalists use to talk about anti-Semitism. Who would like to read text number 7? If nobody raised their hand, I appoint Ed, because I just love listening to him.
Thank you. I'm happy to read it. Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered and separate among the peoples throughout all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws differ from those of every people, and they do not keep the king's laws. It is, therefore, of no use for the king to let them be. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written ordering their destruction, and I will have my workers weigh out 10,000 silver cubes to bring to the king's treasuries. The king said to Haman, the silver you can keep, and the people, do them as you please.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Ahasuerus and Haman are like two people, one of whom had a mound.
Hold on. You're overrunning your lines.
Oh, okay.
Careful, you might not get that contract that I told you about. Okay, what strikes you about the story? Anybody want to jump in? What strikes you here? Doesn't it seem like the king hates the Jews as much as Haman does? And we know Haman hates the Jews, but it seems like the king hates them just as much. In fact, he's even willing to. Haman promises the king 500,000 pounds of silver. By the way, I looked that up. Silver is $24 an ounce this morning, times 500,000 pounds. That's 192 million bucks. And the king says, "No, that's okay. You keep it." He doesn't even want the money. So the question has to be asked. Number one, why did Haman hate the Jews? Number two, why did Ahasuerus hate the Jews? Was their hatred the same kind of hatred? And why did Ahasuerus give up the gelt? Why didn't he take the money? Anybody want to jump in? Jim?
Thinking, and I just, I'm going back to my teachings, but I can't remember. I don't have an answer for you, Rabbi.
Okay. Vince, did you want to say something? No? Okay, let us.
Yonatan,
Yes.
I always thought that the king was more ambivalent and it was Haman who really convinced him of such. And this wording, the silver you keep and the people do with them as you please, I feel like the king didn't really care. He was just letting Haman have his will.
I think it's pretty clear that Haman definitely has something going on. King not as much, but he must have enough going on to say, keep the money, I don't need it. So yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. Anyone else? Okay, let us look at text number 8. Ed, keep going, please.
Ahasuerus and Haman are like two people, one of whom had a mound of dirt in his field, Ahasuerus, and the other who had a deep ditch in his field, Haman. The owner of the ditch mused to himself, "I wish I could buy the mound of gold. I wish I could buy the mound of dirt to fill up my ditch." And the owner of the mound said to himself, "I wish I could purchase the right to dump my dirt in his empty dish." Not long afterwards, the two met. The owner of the ditch said, "Sell me your mound of dirt." The owner of the dirt said, "Take it for free."
Thank you. So, my friends, Kabbalists were not simple people. The Kabbalists, to use the word genius, underestimates them. These were people that were so rare. And this is the best analogy they could come up with. How do you understand this analogy? Bottom line is simply they both share this desire to get rid of the Jews. So the deal was good for both of them. Haman had a ditch, Ahasuerus had the mound. They made a deal. Both of them are happy. So my question is, why do you need the analogy? Isn't it an obvious thing? What purpose does the analogy serve? Anybody?
But one that makes it easier to accept than just going out and saying it out openly.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Very good. So for some reason, we do need the analogy. So let's look at really what's the meaning of the mound and the ditch. What ditch are we talking about? Are the Jews like a ditch? Are they like a mound? What's going on here? And how would annihilating the dirt fill up the ditch? I don't know. It doesn't sound like a great metaphor to me. Yet the sages. Well, let's read the Maharal of Prague.
Maybe they just had both. They both had something to gain. That there was a benefit to both of them. You know,
sure.
And yeah, I guess so. Maybe that's the analogy, that if they each had something to gain by this action.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see what the Maharala
Wasn't that the
Prague.
same analogy of Abraham buying the cave? That they both had something to gain from that?
Yeah, I mean, I see, yeah, I mean, I can see how they relate, sure. Let's see what one of the great Kabbalists, his name was the Maharala Prague, lived in the 1500s in Prague, in Czechoslovakia. He was definitely an all-star. If there was an all-star team, he'd be on it. He may not be a starter, but he was one of the big guys in Kabbalah. Let's look at text number 9. It's a short one. Who would like to read from the Maharala Prague, Rabbi Yehuda Low, text number 9? Come on, somebody.
I'll read it.
I will.
I'll read it.
Go ahead, Tex.
Well, I don't wear the glasses though. When discussing Arissa's perspective, the Jews are referred to as a mound. Mound is not harmful to the owner of a field, it's simply extraneous. A trench, on the other hand, is a void. Hyman considers the Jews as a pit. Their very presence created a lack and void.
Thank you, Vince. So what is the Maharal telling us here? Something very, very profound that I don't see, but thankfully the Lubavitcher Rebbe in 1965 expounded upon this point, and basically he said as follows. He said there are two types of Jew haters. The ones that simply don't get us, and the ones who see our presence as a dangerous problem. These are the two kinds of Jew haters. Ones that don't get us and the ones that feel like they do get us. Achashverosh, the king, didn't understand the Jews. To him, they were a waste. They were extra. They were like a mound. He didn't know what to do with us. So when Haman had a plan, he said, okay, I don't really need them anyway. They're yours. Achashverosh, you could say, is your typical non-friend of the Jews. He doesn't see a place for the Jew. To him, the Jew just doesn't fit in. Jews are different. We're non-conforming. We act strange. We do strange stuff, strange rituals. We go up to strangers in shopping centers and say, hi, do you want to put on tefillin? I mean, we're really weird. We're an unnecessary mound. And frankly, he'd just prefer if the Jews weren't around. But then you have Haman. Haman is sensitive. He gets what the Jews are all about. Jews have Torah, Jews have mitzvahs. We're a light unto the nations. We're God's chosen people. He reads the Torah also, and he says that God calls us the chosen people and a light unto the nations. And our job is to spread good and godly values to everybody. And it really kind of upsets him. Doesn't like it. It does not like that about us. It's interesting because we ourselves, if somebody says, if we're approached generally, when somebody says, are you God's chosen people? We usually say, chosen people? What do you mean? We're not chosen people. Oh, you mean what it says in the Torah? Well, that's not really what it means. We're the only ones who deny that that's true. But Haman gets it. Haman gets that it is true. And it really, really upsets him. I don't recommend that anybody read Mein Kampf, but if you did read Mein Kampf by Hitler, may his name be erased, you'll see that he says why he hates the Jews. He hates them for two reasons. Jews are guilty for bringing two things into the world. One of them is conscience, and the other is circumcision. I can't even say circumcision, by the way. That's a different story. So Hitler, Haman, they feel guilt. They on a certain level, they feel guilty for the kind of lives that they live. The Jew makes Haman feel empty inside, devoid of meaning, like a trench, like a ditch. Haman is a different kind of Jew hater. He feels that the Jew is the cause of all those problems. By the way, if we go into the story, if you read in the book of Esther, Haman has it all. He's got the whole empire. He's number two. He's He's basically running the entire empire, the largest empire in the world. He goes home to his wife and kids, and they're telling him how great he is and all of his exploits and all of his money and all of his power. And what does he say? He says, yeah, but it means nothing because this Jew Mordecai refuses to stand up and bow for me. You understand what kind of individual we're dealing with here? And it's not uncommon. We make him crazy. So he's a different kind of Jew hater. He feels that we are the cause of all the problems. We ruin everything, including his happiness. On a deeper level, it's because the Jew carries a higher divine message. Because we basically are saying implicitly, if not explicitly, that everyone needs to live a better life. Because life is not cyclical, life is linear, and it's going to a logical conclusion. And to get to that conclusion, we all need to step up. And that's what the Jew is really saying. And that really upsets Haman because he wants the here and now. And he feels empty inside. So basically, how does the story play out? Haman wants the Jews gone because they make him feel empty. So he goes to Ahasuerus, who sees no place for Jews, and asks them for permission to get rid of them. And the king says, yeah, sure, go ahead. You're doing me a favor. So this is.
I don't think the king, I don't get that impression of the king. I think Ellen said it also, that just he's indifferent. He could take it or leave it. That he has no qualm against the Jews, but he's indifferent either way.
He has no qualms about it, but it's okay to wipe them all out? That's a friend of the Jews? Or is that a non-friend of the Jews?
I just think he doesn't care.
Okay.
And I think that's what most people in today's world, they're not totally anti-Semitic. They just don't care. It's not on their radar screen.
Who else wants to weigh in on this one? I think we're onto something here. Who else has something to say here?
I do.
Yes, Meg,
This
please.
is Meg.
Hey, Meg.
It was my impression also that he didn't really care. But the fact that if he didn't care, but then Haman says he wants to kill him, he's like, okay, that's fine. That obviously makes him, even though he's uneducated, I think he didn't care because he didn't know that much about the Jews. He was uneducated. He didn't know who they were, and he didn't care to find out who they were. But when he agreed to let Haman kill them, that's when he showed his true colors and became more of a Jew hater, even though he really didn't seem like it before. If he so easily would say, okay, fine, just wipe them out, I don't care.
Very good. Thank you, Meg. Who else?
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. Who else?
I think we see analogies of that even, in our own times in the last 100 years. I mean, like you said about Hitler, in Mein Kampf, I haven't read it either. I have no intention of reading it, but I've read about it that yes, he blamed the Jews for introducing morality into the West, religion, even Christianity. He blamed the Jews for introducing that. So he hated them for their beliefs, for their belief in God, for the way in which they lived their lives. There were other countries in Europe, and I'm sure German citizens who just went along. I mean, the Jews didn't matter too much for them. They would just collaborate with the Nazis. You want the Jews from France to go? We'll put them in the trains for you, and off they go. So these people had no use for the Jews, but the Nazis, Hitler had a visceral reason for not wanting for wiping out the Jews. And I think even today, among radical Islamists, particularly Iran, many of them, I believe, view the Jews as having inordinate power in the United States. And they consider the U.S. the great Satan, Israel's the little Satan. And they ascribe tremendous power to the Jews in the United States, which is why they not only want to wipe out Israel, they want to kill the Jews as well. Just the way I see things, in the modern era.
Very interesting.
I think it goes back a little farther, excuse me. From what you were saying, first, go back to Mein Kampf. I unfortunately read it many, many years ago as a young college student. And basically he stole concepts and ideas and from Nietzsche, but did not take the entire phrase from Nietzsche, what Nietzsche was actually saying. So he just borrowed things, the Superman concept, etc., you know, the racial purity, etc. But I think you hit it right on the head. I don't think most people are educated enough throughout the world, including our country, what a Jew is, what we teach, what we think of, how we think, what it means. It's just so easy to find a group to pick on. I lived in Hartford, Connecticut for a while, and I can remember the blacks being so happy that the Puerto Ricans were coming. They said, finally, somebody else to pick on. And they meant that, because in a joking way, in one way, but that became the second highest population of Puerto Ricans in the United States at the time. This is back in the 1980s. This is what people do. They look for something to blame their problems on, and Jews have been the easy one. We've been used, I don't know, since the beginning of time. It's a group of people that contribute, that are intelligent, that are family-oriented. Their family is so important to them. Education is important, contributing to your world. I don't think anybody thought, what are the Jews contributing in these societies that we've talked about throughout the centuries, what they were contributing. It didn't really matter to them. They were a small amount of people in most cases. And I think that just went on. And that's what Hitler did, decided, hey, this is a way to do things. I got to find somebody to be angry with, and I got to have the people in the country angry so they'll forget about all the troubles they have. And they chose that way. It's disturbing. I think more people should read Mein Kampf to see exactly how idiotic word salad that was written there. And I'm seeing it again in this country, and it's leaders. I mean, we have leaders who are Jewish. Blinken, who's our Secretary of State, is
hold
Jewish.
on, Mr. Osborne. Hold on. No politics.
Yeah. Well, there's a leader, and somebody, we want to pick on him now. That's one of our spokesmen, our leaders. Nobody seems to want to mention that, and I'm glad that nobody's going to attack him for that. But this is what we have, and I don't know how you fight this, because the people are really ignorant. Dumbness you can have no control over, but ignorance is a choice, and these people choose to be ignorant. And most people say it's just easier. I don't need to have to know that. I don't want to know about that.
Okay, so how would you? This is for Vince. This is for everybody. What about those people that are not ignorant? What about those people who know exactly who we are? They know all the contributions we've made, and they still hate us. How do you explain that?
Well, they're total anti-Semites then. I mean, they're the Hamans.
Well, they're Hamans, not a Hashvarosh.
They find a use for it. They find a use to, again, they're intelligent, they're educated, they know, and they say, hey, if we can use this, everybody has done it before, this makes it easy. We don't have to go find another target.
Okay, so we could say that some people hate us, or I won't even use the word hate. Some people don't like us because they don't understand us.
Yeah, they don't know why they
don't like us or hate us because they do understand us. But either way, the result is the same.
Rabbi, can I jump in for a minute?
Please do.
So I hadn't thought about things quite this way until you started asking these questions. So I'm going to come at this differently. I've always been very blonde, and growing up did not look typically Jewish, whatever that means. Was taken more for a shiksa than anything else. Was even asked if I was adopted. I was so fair. And as I grew up, and especially when I started working, well, I should not even then. When I went to college and I was being rushed in a sorority, I was rushed in non-Jewish sororities too. And when they got to the last stage and they put you in a room and you sat in the middle with the other girls around you, and they asked you personal questions. And when they'd ask me, what church do I go to? And I'd say, I don't go to church, I'm Jewish. The room got very silent, and I never heard from them again. All right. Now, in my business life, I never brought my Judaism to work. I wanted particular training, and I wanted to have certain opportunities, and experienced other people using the word kike, yid, finally went ballistic when somebody said they had a Holocaust joke, which I won't repeat. Had two clients, lawyers who were one Jewish, one non-Jewish. And when the Jewish partner went out of the room to get something, the non-Jewish partner says, you know, my partner's a Jew, thinking I'm not Jewish. And I said, I am too. And I thought, if you want to work with me, fine. If you don't. So the way I'm looking at this now is that there is, well, let me try it this way too. There are people who do not like the Black community. Blacks are X. Okay, it's this thought that they have. It's this prejudice that they have. And I think that as Jews, it's the same thing. It's the X. And I wrote an article in American Thinker. I was looking for it. I didn't have it. I want to quote something about Jews being a race. We should be a protective race, because everything that happens to us comes under the heading of race, from being targeted, from being tolerated, from being excluded, on ad infinitum. So I think that there is this fallacy about us. And once that word Jew is said, all of the venom that people hold, all of the hostility that people hold, is now assigned to that person or group. That's my feeling.
Very interesting.
I think we're a race.
All right. There are people that agree with you, and I assure you there are people that disagree with you.
Yes.
Anyone else want to weigh in?
One comment I would make as a young man, I can remember my father, Rabbi Shalom, had passed, and I came under the wing of my uncle. And my uncle Jacob was not a schooled individual, but he was quite knowledgeable. He read and could read. He could also learn the mufter. He was quite a Jew, and he was quiet about it, but he was a very strong man. And he turned to me one time. I was 17. I was going away to college, and he grabbed me by my wrist, and he looked at me. He says, I have to tell you something. When things are good, Jews are okay. When things get bad, Jews are not okay. You have to have eyes in the back of your head. Look and listen and keep your mouth shut till you know what you got to do. And I can remember him saying that as if we're standing here right now in 1964. And it's inherent. He couldn't explain it. We had family that came over. My father was the first generation. And they, they worked, they succeeded because everybody at that one moment was here for freedom and opportunity to practice their religion, to live without the hammer over their head. But as things got better, you can follow the economics of it. You can follow how the Jews are treated.
Very well said, Jim. Thank you very much. I'd like to just continue on, and then, because I want to finish Bayer before 9 o'clock, and then we can stay here till the cows come home, though I don't really understand what that expression means. I think everybody knows that.
In the dust, they come to eat, Rabbi.
With a bunch of rural Georgians, I guess you guys know. Here's the bottom line, my friends. Anti-Semitism comes from who we are, not what we do. It's a matter of our essential identity. And that's why it never seems to go away. That's why the reasons for anti-Semitism keep changing. None of them is the real reason. That's just applying the rationale after the fact. That's just painting the bullseye after we shoot the arrow. So what do we do about this hate? Well, you have to come back next week to know what we do about the hate. But I do want to leave you with somewhat of a message of hope, because I don't want anyone to be depressed. I do know a good psychiatrist if anybody needs one, but I want to try to leave you with some hope here. There's different ways to respond to this, obviously. I mean, to people who want to harm us, God forbid. One way is to fold and crumble. I just want to interject the story because it's on my mind. A colleague of Rabbi Markovits and mine back in the 80s, when was Glasnost? Was that the 90s, the 80s? I can't remember anymore. When the Soviet Union started to come apart, Glasnost, all that stuff.
Reagan, it's the time, mid-80s.
Okay, mid-80s. So Lubavitcher Rebbe started sending rabbis to the former Soviet Union. And one of them, I forgot what town it was in, it may have been Kharkov, a very big city. And he met a woman, he met a Jewish woman, and she didn't look Jewish at all. A Jewish woman. And she said to him, I hope, you know, by the way, if you're ever going to tell a story, you should actually know the story before you start talking to him. Hi. So he meets this woman, and she says to him, you know, under the Soviet Union, anti-Semitism was illegal. So the only way that people could be anti-Semitic was by denying you a job or whatever. They could discriminate against you, but nobody could just be in your face an anti-Semite. And as soon as Glasnost came, I have a neighbor, and I never had much in common, but all of a sudden, the neighbor is talking Zid. What is Zid in Russian? It's like saying a kike. It's a terrible, terrible pejorative in Russian. And she says, he said to her, this is really embarrassing. All right, here's the point to the story. The point of the story she says to him, you know, why is it that bothers me so much, but it doesn't look like it would bother you? And he said, it's very simple. If somebody calls me Zid, I take it as a compliment. You're the one who takes it as an insult. Now, you may ask me what that has to do with what we're talking about. I really can't tell you. So I'm going to get back to my notes and finish up. Welcome to my stream of consciousness. So, bottom line is, how do we have to be strong, obviously. We have to be bold. And it's sort of analogous to olive oil. How do you make olive oil? You press olives, you squeeze olives. And the Jews are actually, in Torah, the Jews are likened to olives. In fact, who wants to read text number 10? Text number 10, somebody? Text number 10.
I will.
All right, good.
All right. God called your name a leafy olive tree, beautiful with good fruit. Jeremiah 11:16. In comparing Israel to an olive tree, Jeremiah is teaching us that just as the olive tree is allowed to ripen on the tree, just as the olive is allowed to ripen on the tree, and then is brought down from the tree and beaten, and then is brought to the press and ground in a grinding mill, and then tied up with ropes, and then stones are brought to crush it, and finally it yields its oil. So it is with Israel.
Well, that's not exactly uplifting, is it? But there's some truth in it. Some truth in it that the best oil comes out when you squeeze it. What do we use that pure olive oil for? To light lamps, to light Hanukkah lights, to light up the world. So we are not looking to be squeezed and tied up and all those other terrible things that they do to these poor olives. We're not looking for any of that. But the reality is, in Israel today, the country is together like it has not been together probably since 73 or 60, even 67. Do you understand that while the government is busy administering the war, the people are taking care of everything else? People are getting together as volunteers. They're going to pick farmers' crops. They're taking in laundry for the soldiers. They're catering meals. It's all being done on a volunteer basis and everybody's involved. Nobody asks, are you for judicial reform? Are you not? Are you Sephardi? Are you Ashkenazi? Are you religious? Are you secular? All that disappears. And that's what it means, squeezing the olive. Now, obviously, we'd like to get there without being squeezed, but this is where we find ourselves. It's only by being crushed that the greatest oil comes out. Let us conclude with, I want to look at two more sources.
Rabbi, can I ask you another question?
Hit me.
You know, you read at the beginning that that even when we were slaves, there was envy and jealousy under those conditions. And I think that one of the parts of envy is that I believe this, with all that we have gone through for millennia, we never carry hate and we never see ourselves as victims. And we have always overcome and done better in the next phase. And I think that's that envy, that people can't understand how we are able to always better ourselves in the next stage.
You make an interesting point, but I just want to point out to you, while it's true what you said about Egypt, let's not forget that the Egyptians that hated us 3,400 years ago, we were responsible for turning them into a superpower. It was Joseph that came and took a schmata little country and turned it into the center of the world, the greatest superpower of its time. So yes, your point then makes sense if you say yes, and they were jealous. Okay, but how do you explain Jews stuck in a ghetto in the Pale of Settlement in the Ukraine or in Poland? We had nothing. We lived a deprived life. We had absolutely nothing. We weren't a threat to anybody, and we were hated just as much. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are. So you can't say that envy is it. Yes, envy is a factor in certain situations. But as we're saying over and over again, there is no one factor. It's an essential elemental point. I want to talk about Fritz Haber. Fritz Haber actually won the Nobel Prize, I think, in chemistry. He actually invented synthetic fertilizer. And it was basically that invention that enabled a world to not be hungry, because there wasn't enough natural fertilizer to fertilize all the crops so that the world could eat. So he was responsible for that. Unfortunately, unwittingly, he was also responsible for the Zyklon gas that was used to kill his people
Right.
in the Holocaust. That being said, okay, can somebody mute, or can everybody mute? Whatever. All right, who wants to read about Fritz Haber? And that would be text number 11.
Okay.
Ed, we're back to you.
Okay, is this the one at the bottom of page 5?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Nazi anti-Semitism before the Holocaust had the general effect of restoring Jewish consciousness where it had eroded severely. The most assimilated of German Jews, often for the first time in their lives, now felt the need to confront and to reaffirm their Jewishness. At the age of 24, the Nobel Prize-winning Jewish chemist Fritz Haber had converted to Protestantism for the sake of his career. As the head of an important scientific institute, he became an influential figure, especially after he succeeded in developing poison gas for the Germans army.
Keep going, Ed, I'm sorry.
German army in World War I. But as a racial Jew, Haber was forced into resigning his position in 1933. Nazism remade Haber into a Jew despite himself. To Albert Einstein, he wrote, "In my whole life, I have never been so Jewish as now."
Thank you, Ed.
Yeah.
Anybody want to weigh in on that one? It took all these terrible atrocities for him to feel Jewish? Yeah, I guess that's who we are.
You know, another irony of the Nazi era was that the greatest physicists in Germany were all Jews. The greatest physicists in Europe were Jews, and Hitler drove them out. And of course, they helped the Allies develop the atomic bomb. And you know, and some of the Nazis were aware of how much, you know, how important the Jews were to physics, and Hitler rejected it all, called it Jewish physics, you know. But if you wanted to win the war, it was the absolute opposite thing he should have done. So I think it clearly points out that Hitler he was more concerned with annihilating the Jews than he was in winning the war.
Yeah, very good. So my takeaway from this Fritz Haber story is that it took something from the outside to make the Jew feel like a Jew, which is very similar to the Hank Greenberg story. Helene, are you up to reading number 12? It's a long one.
Hank Greenberg had never wanted to be known as a Jewish baseball player. All he wanted to do was play baseball, but it was his lot to play baseball in the most anti-Semitic period in American history. And in times of anti-Semitism, Jews and anti-Semites alike garner attention. Whether he liked it or not, Greenberg was never going to be just a baseball player. Detroit was home to the two most notorious and virulent anti-Semites in America, Henry Ford and Charles Coughlin. In 1919, Ford bought a small weekly newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, with a circulation of about 70,000. Ford sold the paper for 5 cents an issue with the slogan under the masthead, "Chronicler of the Neglected Truth." Much of Ford's neglected truth was anti-Semitic, often resurrecting old hate diatribes from Europe. In May 1920, the Independent ran an article based on the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, 19th century European hoax that purported to describe an international plot by Jews to take over the world. The Ford version was called "The International Jew, the World's Problem." For 91 editions, the newspaper featured an anti-Semitic attack each week, and regular attacks continued periodically after that. Within 2 years, the paper had increased its circulation 10 times to 700,000, making it one of the most popular papers in the US. Father Coughlin was a Detroit Catholic priest. His early radio broadcasts made thinly veiled reference to Jews, but by 1935, the veil was off. In one broadcast, he raged, "When we get through with the Jews in America, they'll think the treatment they received in Germany was nothing." Coughlin grew increasingly virulent in his anti-Semitism, and the more vicious he got, the more listeners he gained. By the late 1930s, he was a national figure, railing against the Jews with an estimated 20 million to 30 million listeners tuning into his broadcasts.
Wow, wow, wow. So, Helene, do you mind just bringing it all home and read the last text for the evening, number 13?
Sure. By 1938, the 27-year-old Greenberg had matured into a deeper understanding of world events and his place among them. He had begun to read more of the newspapers than the sports pages. He understood the significance of what he was doing. Being Jewish did carry with it a special responsibility, Hank wrote. After all, I was representing a couple of million Jews among 100 million Gentiles, and I was always in the spotlight. I was there every day, and if I had a bad day, everyone was calling me names so that I had to make good. I just had to show them that a Jew could play ball. I came to feel that as a Jew, just lost something here. Hold on. As a Jew, hit a home run, I was hitting one against Hitler.
Wow, wow, wow. So there you have it, my friends. I really hope that we do not have to experience pressure. I really hope that we can get through this without the kind of pressure that we've been talking about this evening. But whether we do or whether we don't, our job is to make this world a brighter place. And each of us is doing that, each in his own way. There's no one way to do it. So that concludes the discussion for this evening. Next week, same bat time, same bat channel. Now that we've explored the roots of the issue, we're going to talk about the pragmatics. What should our direct response be to the hate? Should we lobby? Should we fight? Should we pray? Should we do something else? So please join Rabbi Markovits and I next week. And what time is it? It's almost 9 o'clock Eastern. I'm happy to stand if you guys want to chat, talk, whatever. Whoever needs to go, thank you very much for coming. Whoever wants to stay, please stay. And I really, really appreciate you being here. Rabbi Markovits, I don't know if you're still here or not, but if you are, anything you want to say in closing?
Rabbi, it's good to see you.
Thank you. It's nice to see everyone as well. And I'm really glad to have been a part, to be able to participate in this class. Rabbi Hambourger, you've proven yourself yet again, excellent orator. So thank you. I do want to take a moment to share with everybody, for those of us that are in Georgia, we are having we're having 5 menorah lightings, and I'm looking at a 6th now, all over the state of Georgia. Actually, one of our volunteers who is going to be helping to install the menorahs is with us today on this Zoom, and that's really cool. So thank you, Jacob.
Absolutely.
We have on Thursday night, first night of Hanukkah, we are putting up a menorah, lighting menorah for the 3rd time in Columbus. And that'll be fantastic. The mayor will join us with God's help, and that's been great. And then on Monday night, Rabbi Hambourger and I will be in Hiawassee. So Ed, that's somewhere near you. Maybe you'll be brave enough and come out in the middle of the night. And,
maybe
Hiawassee, and again probably at 5:30 p.m. on Monday night. And on Tuesday night, we're in Cartersville for the first time ever. There's never been a menorah in Cartersville like this. So this is exciting, and the Jewish population there are really looking forward to it. So that's cool. And Wednesday, we have 2. One in the city of Forsyth, just on top of Macon. And the menorah was delivered there this morning because there's going to be a parade, a holiday parade. And one of the floats in this year's parade is going to be a menorah. And we can only thank Margot Kenneret for her excitement and devotion for that. And then, of course, we're serving our armed forces at Robbins Air Force Base. I'll be there on Wednesday night to celebrate Hanukkah with the Jewish airmen and airwomen. And I'm looking at another menorah in Villa Rica, and perhaps one even in Winder. So keep what do we say? Keep tuned for exciting updates. But if you're here and if you're available and if you can come and celebrate the excitement of the holiday, please come out and join us.
So I have a question. Are you going to be eating latkes every one of those menorahs?
Yes, there will be latkes, there will be donuts. I am on a diet, so I will not eat any of it. I will watch, and I will salivate. Everybody else gets to enjoy some solid Hanukkah stuff.
Fair enough. All right, anybody want
Can
to
I
talk?
say something?
Yes, of
Rabbi,
course.
Hi, Meg.
oh,
Hey, if anybody is not able to go to any of those menorah lightings, but you are near Blue Ridge, we are having the first night Thursday in Blue Ridge at 5:30.
That's amazing, Meg. Thank you for putting that out there.
Rabbi, it's been a while.
Yeah, how you doing, Jim? I like the yarmulke. You got a Sephardic yarmulke.
Yep, I sure do. It was, but I got it right here in Atlanta.
Okay,
You well?
let's hear the
Are
juice.
you well? Everything?
Yeah, thank God. Everything is great except for the obvious, which is a lot of stuff going on, and we need victory on every level, spiritually and
Well,
otherwise.
you know, one step at a time. But when I listen to the people tonight, I have confidence.
Well,
I have confidence in God, but I think God has to let us speak for Him too, here now. So I wish you all health and happiness. It was a privilege to be with you this evening.
And we'll come back next week. Don't make this into a eulogy. Come back next week.
Okay,
I'll be
very
here.
good. I'll see you.
Bye.
Bye now.
Ed, you got a future in the business.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Norman Gladys, how are you? All right, I guess that is it.
Hey, Rabbi Yonatan,
Yeah.
it's Gene Corey and Joy Corey.
Hey, Gene. Hi, Joy.
Just wanted to make a point about the king. And what we were thinking of was the Lord used the king to set Haman up to his own destruction and to make it a blessing for the people of Esther. And at that time, we were thinking about that. And I think God used the king to set Haman up for his own downfall, thinking in his own pride, oh, I've got them, no problem. The Lord used the king and brought him to his own destruction. And I thought that was quite interesting.
Interesting. Very interesting point. Thank you for sharing that.
Welcome.
Anyone else? No? Helene, it's great to see you.
But wait a minute, we can't forget the role of,
Classes just to see you.
oh. Yonatan, we can't forget the role of Esther.
Okay, tell us about the role of Esther.
Well, of course, now you're testing me. How was it that her uncle convinced her to go and become part of the court of the king, correct?
He didn't convince her. The king sent out underlings to go and collect the most beautiful and the most virtuous women in the entire kingdom. And amongst all the many fantastic women that were brought back to the king, Esther gained the most favor. But the high point for me in the whole story is when she's in the king's court and Mordecai gets a message to her saying, you have to approach the king. And she writes back to him and says, if you go into the king's chamber unannounced, it's off with your head unless he tips his scepter to you and says, come in. So I can't do it. And what does he say to her? Can anybody tell me what he says back to Esther? Mordecai says, don't think for a moment that if you say no to me, that the Jewish salvation shall not come from somewhere else. It can come from any number of places, and if it does, you will be completely written out of history. You will be in oblivion. You will be irrelevant forever. So she said, I'm in. I thought that was amazing, personally.
Rabbi, I have one other question. I'm just curious of your thoughts on this. It's been mentioned, I mean, I've read it many places that anti-Semitism might have actually helped the Jews stay together as a cohesive people, in the sense that assimilation has caused Jewish communities around the world to literally disappear. But with anti-Semitism, assimilation becomes more difficult.
Unfortunately, it's a valid point. There's a story during the times of the Alta Rebbe in the late 1700s, when Napoleon was sweeping through Europe. Along with that sweep came the promise of enlightenment, which meant that the Jews could get out of the ghetto and live a life like every other cosmopolitan European at the time. So it was that mentality that was fighting against the Tsar. The Russian Tsar, of course, had the Jews in ghettos. The Alter Rebbe was actually in favor of Russia against France, in favor of the Tsar against Napoleon. Why? Because he knew that as much as the Jews would suffer physically under the Tsar, they would be erased spiritually under Enlightenment. So I think that goes to reinforce your point, but I have to come back to the fact that God can also accomplish his goal by elevating the Jewish people, by making it easy for the Jewish people, and not by putting us under pressure and squeezing us like those olives. I keep thinking about after everything else and crushing us, then he ties us up with rope and squeezes more. I'm sorry, but like, I don't know about you, or I do know about you. Enough already. Enough. We don't need this pressure anymore. It's time. It's time for us. We've paid forward. Do you understand? Yes, of course you understand. Why am I saying do you understand? Of course you understand. 6 million of our brethren died in the Holocaust. I don't want to repeat all the things that happened on October 7th and since then, but enough. We've paid forward. God, you have to send us our redemption right now. Can't take another day of this. Can't take another moment. And that's what we're waiting for, is for us to be sick and tired, each and every one of us, and force his hand. Enough is enough. Call me what you want. Call me an Apikoros. Call me whatever you want. Call me it doesn't matter. Enough.
It's almost like the argument that Tevye makes in Fiddler on the Roof with God, you know. Could you find somebody else to pick on for change?
Yeah, for sure.
So it's really, the tipping point isn't here yet, where good triumphs over evil.
Well, the tipping point is here. We just have to want it badly enough. One of us has to put their little finger on the scale. That's what has to happen. That's it. God promised us redemption. God promised us Messiah. God promised that we would all be sipping pina coladas under palm trees. That's a fact. And the latest that could possibly happen is the year 6000. We are now in the year 5784. So if we do it God's way, we have to wait up to 216 years. But he built into the contract the ability for the Jews to speed up that process, which means that we've done everything we can do. We are there. We are at the goal line. We just have to that's it. One more little something. Women, light your Shabbos candles Friday afternoon before sundown. Men, put on tefillin. Everybody, send money to Israel. That's all you got to do. That's it. One more mitzvah can tip the whole scale, and we got to do it. This is enough. This is enough. My rabbi in Los Angeles, the one who was responsible for making me a religious Jew, his name was Rabbi Lebatansky, Alva Shalom. And he used to, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but he used to say the following. He used to say, the Eberster nicht der Mensch. He said that God is not a mensch. He's not a nice guy. Yes, of course, he's God and he loves us and all that, but he's got to show it. He's got to show it right now. Enough is enough. I can't take another day of reading these headlines. I don't know about you. I can't take another day of somebody that I thought was fair and balanced in the media coming out and calling us terrorists. I can't take another day of this. I'm telling you, I'm going totally meshuggah. All right, I've ranted enough. Anyone else? Don't get me going. Norm, you got something to say? Gladys, take yourself off mute, Gladys. Take yourself off mute. Press the unmute button. All right, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very interesting.
All right, come back next week. Don't forget.
Yes, we will. We'll be
All
here.
right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Yonatan, stay on.
Okay. Talk.
Rabbi too.
Yeah. What do you want to talk about?
You. No.
Gladys, take yourself off mute. We want to hear you. Gladys, raise your hand if you hear me. Okay, now use that same hand and press the unmute button.
No, she has to press the mute, the X off of the mute, the line.
X off the mute, whatever that means.
The lower left-hand corner.
Can
The
you go
mute,
find like a neighbor's 5-year-old? He can do it for you. Oh, you did it.
no.
Gladys. Gladys. Norm. Your lips are moving.
Norm, you can do it. I know you can do this.
Lower left corner has a microphone that says mute under it with a red line. Use the mouse to
They're using a cell phone.
uncheck it. Oh, they're using a cell phone? Then I don't know how to do it. Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah, you bet. Just from the angle of the camera, it looks like it's a cell phone. It's my
See?
guess.
Okay.
They're cute.
What else, sis?
Just what a wonderful group of people
Yeah,
came
great.
together.
Really great.
Yeah, lovely. First of all, Rabbi Markovits, nice to meet you.
Yes, absolutely. I've heard about you.
Oh, my goodness.
Yonatan's sister.
So are you going to ask me, is Yonatan younger or older than me? Because all rabbis always ask me that. That know my
Really?
brother. Yes, they always do.
Someone once taught me that it's not appropriate to ask a woman her age.
Ah, true. But no, that's fine.
I don't know if that's still in. It might no longer be the way.
Well, I don't know anymore. All the rules that I thought I grew up with aren't there anymore. But great job, Yonatan.
Thank
You
you.
feel good? You should feel good.
Yeah, great. Well, Hashem.
Yeah, it was very good. And next week,
You like my library? You like my virtual library?
well, I saw it last class, but you look smaller in this. I wanted to let you know because I wrote down some things for you. So we'll talk.
I lost weight.
I'm sure. Yes. Anyway, now I just wanted to compliment you as your sister.
Thank you.
I'm proud of you, my brother.
Yeah.
And I love learning with you.
Thank you. The feeling is mutual.
Wow.
All right, Gladys, did you get yourself off mute? I don't want to hang up.
We got, I
They
think
are.
we did. I think we did.
Yay! Okay.
Can you hear us?
Yes, we hear you. Now put yourself back on mute. No, just kidding. Just kidding.
That's enough for now, huh?
All right. I want to tell everybody who's online that you are looking at my two favorite Jews east of the Mississippi, right here, Norm and Gladys. South of the Mississippi line and east of the Mississippi.
Yeah. Next week we may do a little bit better.
Okay.
I'll see you tomorrow, Jonathan.
All right, Nehemiah. See you tomorrow.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks for joining me.
Amanza Hashem.
That's
Right.
awesome. All right, guys.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
Have a
you
good
for a
rest of-
fantastic idea, really.
It's
All right.
lovely. Thank you.
All right.